being the greatest of all time doesn't mean you get $30 million.
Right.
Me and Jon Jones never got along outside of the cage. We've had a horrendous relationship for 16 years.
Let's be honest, and since I won that fight, he's gone completely quiet, and he'll continue to go completely quiet about me until he retires, because there's no way on earth that he's going to fight me. Not a chance. I will retire Jon Jones without even fighting him.
Jon Jones called us last night and retired. Jon Jones is officially retired. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the UFC.
When the most dominant fighter in UFC history suddenly disappears, it's never just retirement, it's rebellion. Jon Bones Jones, the man Dana White once called the greatest to ever step into a fight period, has just pulled off the boldest move in combat sports history. A $30 million deal with the Professional Fighters League, the kind of money Dana swore he'd never see, and a contract so revolutionary it's shaking the foundation of the UFC itself. For over 15 years, Jones was the UFC's crown jewel, the prodigy who broke records, defied physics, and carried the brand through scandal after scandal. But in the shadows, something darker was brewing. Behind every title defense, every press conference, every headline, there was a quiet war between the fighter who wanted freedom and the promoter who wanted control. Now that war has gone public. Dana White, the architect of modern MMA, just got outmaneuvered by the one man he thought he could never lose. The UFC didn't just lose a fighter, it lost its leverage. Because Jon Jones didn't just sign a contract, he rewrote the playbook. For the first time, a UFC legend walked away not because he was washed up or broke down, but because he refused to play by the system's rules. And what's most shocking, Dana didn't even see it coming. No warning, no press release, just silence followed by the headline that changed everything. Jon Jones signs $30 million deal with PFL. But this story isn't about dollar signs. It's about betrayal power and the breaking of a 16-year empire. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand Jon Jones didn't retire. He revolted. And the empire of Dana White may never recover. Long before the contracts, the chaos, and the controversy, Jon Jones was the UFC's golden prophecy. At just 23 years old, he became the youngest champion in the organization's history, a phenom who made seasoned veterans look like amateurs. His reach was otherworldly, his creativity unmatched. Elbows from angles no one had seen before, spinning attacks that turned precision into punishment. Inside the cage, he wasn't fighting opponents, he was dissecting them. Dana White saw it early. In a sport built on brawlers and bruisers, Jones was something else, a strategist, an artist of destruction. Dana called him the greatest talent I've ever seen, the future of MMA, the kind of athlete you build empires around. For years, he did exactly that. Every pay-per-view, every promo, every highlight reel carried the same face, Jon Bones Jones, the unstoppable force. But greatness always comes with a cost. For every victory, there was a headline. Arrests, failed tests, public scandals, the side of Jones the UFC wished it could erase. Yet every time he fell, he came back stronger, sharper, more dangerous. It was almost mythical, the man who couldn't be beaten inside or outside the cage. Dana tolerated it all because Jones was the money printer, the storm that filled arenas and sold millions of pay-per-views. Behind the cameras, though, cracks were forming. The relationship wasn't built on respect, it was built on necessity. Dana needed Jones's brilliance. Jones needed Dana's platform. And both knew one truth: neither dared to say aloud the UFC could make anyone a star. Except the one star too big to control. Jon Jones wasn't just rising. He was evolving into something Dana White feared most, a fighter who didn't need the UFC to be great. It started with what should have been the biggest fight in UFC history, Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. The Predator versus the Prodigy. Power versus precision. Fans were calling it the fight of the century, the perfect stage for Jones to cement himself as the greatest to ever do it. But instead of a super fight, the world got a public meltdown that changed MMA forever. In 2020, after defending his light heavyweight title, Jones wanted a new mountain to climb, the heavyweight division. He set his sights on Ngannou, the scariest knockout artist the sport had ever seen. Negotiations began quietly, but it didn't take long for the peace to shatter. During a press conference, Dana White stepped up to the mic and casually dropped a bomb. Jon Jones wants Deontay Wilder money, $30 million. That one sentence detonated years of trust. Within hours, Jones fired back publicly. He didn't deny it, he called it a lie. "Don't be a liar, Dana," he tweeted. "I never asked for Deontay Wilder's numbers." Then in true Jones fashion, he doubled down. "How about we settle for half that?" The message was clear, he wasn't chasing money. He was demanding respect. Dana didn't flinch. He laughed it off, mocked the request, and moved on. But that laugh was costly, because that was the moment Jon Jones realized the UFC would never see him as a partner, only as a product. The fight collapsed. Jones vacated his belt, walked away, and disappeared from the spotlight. The world saw it as another meltdown, but behind closed doors it was something much deeper, a man quietly declaring war on the empire that made him a star, and now treated him like he was disposable. After the fallout with Dana White, Jon Jones vanished. No training footage, no interviews, no fights. For over 2 years, the man who once defined the sport went completely silent. In a world obsessed with headlines, that silence was deafening. Fans speculated endlessly. Was he done? Was it another scandal? Was this the end of Jon Jones? But what looked like an ending was actually an evolution. While the public thought he was fading, Jones was rebuilding. Not just his body, but his entire identity as a fighter. Gone was the lean, wiry frame that dominated the light heavyweight division. In its place, he was sculpting something monstrous, a version of himself ready to conquer a new frontier heavyweight. Day after day behind closed doors in Albuquerque, Jones was lifting, bulking, studying, and plotting. No more chasing Dana, no more begging for recognition. This time, he was creating leverage. He stayed off social media, off the radar, refusing to feed the UFC's narrative that he was washed up. Instead, he built a new one, a myth of his own making. Every whisper of a comeback, every rumor of a new contract added to the tension. Even his former rivals admitted it. If Jones comes back, it's over for everyone. He wasn't hiding, he was planning. And when he finally did resurface, he looked different, thicker, calmer, more dangerous than ever. He wasn't just preparing for another fight, he was preparing for a takeover. Because Jon Jones understood something most fighters never realize: silence can be a weapon. And when he broke that silence, the entire fight world would hear it. The comeback wasn't about redemption, it was about control, and this time he wasn't giving it back. When Jon Jones finally re-emerged in 2023, it wasn't a comeback, it was a coronation. After more than 3 years of silence, the sport's most polarizing figure walked into UFC 285, heavier, slower looking, and utterly terrifying. Across the cage stood Cyril Gane, the smooth, athletic striker who many believed represented the new era of heavyweights. But that illusion lasted less than 3 minutes. The bell rang. Jones pressed forward, calm and calculating as if he'd never been gone. One feint, one takedown, one choke, and it was over. Gane tapped and the arena exploded. Just like that, Jon Jones became the heavyweight champion of the world. No tune-up fight, no warm-up rounds. He came, he conquered, and he reminded everyone why Dana White once called him the greatest fighter to ever live. But the celebration didn't last. Behind the smiles and the post-fight handshake, the same old tension resurfaced, this time louder. Jones had returned, but he wasn't coming back to play by the UFC's rules. He'd spent years hearing Dana say he didn't deserve Deontay Wilder money. Now standing atop the sport once again, Jones decided to make that number real. $30 million. The same figure that once ended negotiations was now his condition for staying. Dana laughed it off publicly, but behind the scenes, panic began to ripple through the promotion. This wasn't just another fighter asking for a raise. This was their franchise player testing the system. Jones knew his worth, and he wasn't afraid to demand it, because this time the king didn't return to serve the throne. He returned to challenge it. And when Dana refused to pay, the countdown began to the day Jon Jones would do the unthinkable, walk away from the empire he built. When Jon Jones demanded $30 million, the headlines exploded. Some called it greed, others called it guts. But those who knew the sport understood it wasn't about money, it was about principle. For more than a decade, Jones had been the UFC's most bankable name. The face of pay-per-view cards, the man who carried the brand through scandals, controversies, and countless title fights. Yet his paychecks still lagged behind boxers, influencers, and even YouTubers. Jones wanted to change that. Not just for himself, but for every fighter trapped under a system that dictated their worth. If I'm the greatest of all time, he asked, why am I getting paid like I'm replaceable? Dana White wasn't having it. Publicly, he dismissed the figure, scoffing at the idea that being the greatest guaranteed $30 million. Being the GOAT doesn't mean you get paid like Deontay Wilder, he said. It was a statement that revealed everything. In the UFC, greatness was something the company owned, not something the fighters controlled. That's when Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, another all-time great, broke the silence. On a podcast, he said exactly what millions of fans were thinking. The UFC made over $1 billion. Pay the man his $30 million and call it good. Simple, direct, and devastating. Because if the best fighter of his generation couldn't get paid fairly, who could? But Dana wasn't just refusing a paycheck, he was defending an empire. The UFC's entire business model depended on keeping fighters underpaid and overexposed. The moment Jones got what he asked for, the illusion of control would collapse. And Jon knew it. That's why this wasn't just a negotiation, it was a declaration of war. The kind that doesn't end with contracts. It ends with revolutions. For years, the UFC sold fans a powerful story that it was the ultimate stage where legends are made. But behind the lights, the belts, and the hype packages lies a truth few dare to say out loud. The UFC doesn't reward greatness. It rewards obedience. Fighters sign contracts that look glamorous on the surface but are chains underneath. Most earn a fraction of what they're worth, locked into multi-fight deals that give them little freedom and even less leverage. Sponsorships gone. Ever since the UFC signed exclusive deals with Reebok, then Venom fighters lost the right to wear their own brands or earn outside money from sponsors. Those custom logos, those personal patches that once paid rent and gym fees banned. Every dollar now flows through the UFC first, and fighters get whatever crumbs the company decides to share. Meanwhile, outside the cage, the numbers are staggering. A mid-tier boxer can make more in one night than a UFC champion earns in a year. Jake Paul, a YouTuber, turned fighter pockets more from a single exhibition bout than legends like Stipe Miocic or Jose Aldo made defending titles. And yet, when fighters ask for fair pay, they're labeled difficult or ungrateful. Jon Jones saw through the illusion. He understood the real power wasn't in winning belts, it was in owning your name. That's why his $30 million demand terrified Dana White. It wasn't about setting a price, it was about setting a precedent. Because if one fighter could break free and prove that the UFC doesn't own greatness, others would follow. And when that happens, the entire empire begins to crack. Dana's machine thrives on loyalty, but loyalty only lasts as long as the illusion does. Jon Jones just shattered it. By mid-2024, Jon Jones had seen enough. Years of broken promises, public insults, and private contradictions had worn him down. Every time he asked for fair pay, Dana White turned it into a headline. Every negotiation became a battle, every quote a weapon. Jones realized something brutal: the UFC wasn't built to share power. It was built to control it. Inside those walls, freedom didn't exist. So while Dana was busy promoting his next pay-per-view, Jones went quiet again. But this time his silence had a purpose. Behind closed doors, his team began reaching out to people far beyond Las Vegas. Contacts in Dubai, sports executives in Riyadh, representatives from the Professional Fighters League, a promotion backed by new money-hungry investors, and most importantly, no ceiling on fighter earnings. The conversations were discreet, almost invisible to the public eye. To the UFC, Jones was still retired. To PFL insiders, he was the prize of a lifetime, the man who could legitimize their brand overnight. And when Saudi Arabia's sports division entered the picture, the stakes skyrocketed. These weren't small offers. They were life-changing, industry-shaking proposals, ones that made Dana's old threats and pay structures look prehistoric. While White publicly laughed off rumors insisting Jones wasn't going anywhere, the truth was already sealed in ink. PFL executives were quietly preparing their biggest announcement in history, and Jones was ready to deliver the shock the fight world never saw coming. Because this time, it wasn't about another fight. It was about escaping the system itself. Dana thought he could rewrite the narrative like always, but he didn't know Jones had already written a new one. Until one morning, everything changed. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, the headline hit every sports feed on the planet: Jon Jones signs $30 million deal with PFL. No press conference, no UFC statement, just shockwaves. For Dana White, it was a nightmare come true. The face of his empire had walked straight into the arms of his biggest threat. But this wasn't just another contract. This was a declaration of independence. Jon Jones didn't just sign with PFL, he rewrote what it means to be a fighter. His deal wasn't about fight purses or bonuses. It was about ownership. He secured full sponsorship freedom, meaning every logo brand and endorsement belonged entirely to him, not filtered through UFC's exclusive deals. He negotiated pay-per-view equity, giving him a cut of every sale, every stream, every ticket. And thanks to Saudi Arabia's massive sports investment fund, he got guaranteed money, $30 million up front, plus a long-term stake in PFL's super fight division. For the first time in his career, Jon Jones wasn't an employee. He was a partner. Inside the UFC offices, panic turned to silence. Dana White, the man known for his fiery rants and instant rebuttals, said nothing. No interviews, no tweets, no statements. Because what could he say? The fighter he once called the greatest ever had just proven he didn't need the UFC to be great. It was more than a signing, it was a shift in gravity. For years, Dana controlled every narrative, every paycheck, every opportunity. Now Jones had flipped the script. He had power, freedom, and most importantly, ownership of his legacy. Jon Jones didn't leave the UFC, he outgrew it. And for the first time in history, the Empire's king was the one walking away from the throne. When the news of Jon Jones's defection broke, Dana White's empire went eerily quiet. The man known for explosive press conferences and instant comebacks suddenly had nothing to say. Days passed, then weeks with no official statement. Inside the UFC offices, the mood shifted from disbelief to denial. Dana first brushed it off, he's retired. Good for him. Then he tried to spin it, claiming he'd always known Jones would move on eventually. But the truth was impossible to hide. Dana had been blindsided and the world knew it. Soon the rewriting began. The same man Dana once called the greatest fighter of all time was now recast as unreliable, unpredictable, even replaceable. Sound familiar? It's the same playbook used on every star who dared to question the system, downplay, discredit, discard. But this time, no one was buying it. Even UFC legends began breaking ranks. Daniel Cormier, Jones' fiercest rival, admitted he played it smart. He did what was best for him. Michael Bisping called the move a business masterstroke, and Tom Aspinall, the heavyweight, left waiting, said with a smirk, "I'd want $30 million to fight me too." The message was clear, fighters were watching and they were inspired. In locker rooms and group chats across the sport, whispers started to spread. If John can do it, maybe we can too. For the first time, top-tier fighters realized there was life beyond the UFC banner. Freedom wasn't fantasy anymore. It was a path paved in $30 million and Saudi gold. Dana could feel it, the shift. The fear wasn't losing Jones. It was losing control. Because once fighters see they don't need the empire begins to crumble from within. While the headlines screamed about Jon Jones' $30 million payday, one man stood in the shadows, waiting, watching, and fuming. His name was Tom Aspinall. The heavyweight prodigy from Manchester had spent over a year training for one fight, the unification bout against Jon Jones. He was promised the biggest moment of his career. Then, without warning, Jones vanished. For months, Aspinall kept quiet. But when the retirement announcement dropped, his silence broke into prophecy. "I'll retire Jon Jones without even fighting him," he said. At first, fans laughed. Now it sounded hauntingly accurate. Because in a way, that's exactly what happened. Aspinall wasn't just another contender. He was the kind of fighter that kept champions awake at night, young, explosive, fearless. His finishing rate was absurd, his timing surgical. In the heavyweight division, nobody was more dangerous. And Jones knew it. That's why when Dana White confirmed Jones had been offered the fight, Madison Square Garden, full pay, all the promotion in the world, and Jones turned it down, the debate erupted. Was it strategy or fear? Some said Jones was protecting his legacy. Others believed he simply outgrew the UFC circus. But for Aspinall, it felt like betrayal, the biggest fight of his life, stolen before it began. He'd been told for months to stay ready, only to realize he'd been waiting for someone who was already gone. Yet the truth might be simpler. Jon Jones wasn't running from a man. He was running toward an idea. While the UFC obsessed over keeping him in the cage, he was busy building something bigger than any single fight, a legacy that didn't end under Dana White's lights, but started outside them. The fight he skipped might have been the key to something far greater. Jon Jones didn't retire, he defected. What looked like the quiet end of a career was actually the loudest statement ever made by a fighter in the modern era. He walked away from the UFC's kingdom, not in defeat, but in rebellion. For nearly 2 decades, Dana White's empire thrived on one illusion that no fighter was bigger than the brand. But when Jones crossed the line, that illusion shattered. The UFC's myth of control is crumbling one fighter at a time. Francis Ngannou was the first to challenge it, trading the octagon for freedom and fortune. Jones was the second, and he didn't just follow the path, he built a new one. Together, they've shown the world that the letters UFC don't define greatness, the fighters do. And now others are watching. The whisper has become a warning: if the best can leave and earn more, what's stopping the rest? Dana White can spin the story, reframe the narrative, even crown new champions. But the shadow of Jon Jones will loom over every press conference, every contract, every fighter who dares to ask, what am I really worth? Because the truth is simple. Jones didn't lose the UFC lost him. He broke free from the machine, not to run from a fight, but to start a revolution. A war not for belts, but for autonomy. And maybe that's the ultimate irony, that in a sport built on domination, the real fight was never inside the cage. So now the question belongs to you: was Jon Jones brave for walking away? Or just done fighting the system? Tell us what you think in the comments, because this war for legacy is far from over.